We got another interesting question here from Ben, which I really like. Which past NBA players before 2000 do you think would excel in today's game, one from each position?
The first guy that came to mind when I think of any point guard, and I know this is pre 2000, but it's two guys. The first is Rod Strickland. I think with how crafty he was and how nasty he was as a ball handler, I think if you give him today's pace and space, the open environment, same goes for Allen Iverson. Like Allen Iverson's obviously on a different tier, but I think if you give him a spread out offense in today's NBA, that those two guys would thrive with a lot more space to operate. The two guard, I know you're quite fond of him. I think Reggie Miller would be a monster in today's game with how prevalent the three-pointer is, everything he could do off-ball, relocating, stuff like that. I'm trying to think about underrated guys, too, because the first guy that I think about it like small forward is like Larry Bird. But it's like, I mean, Larry would thrive in any role ever.
I have a full team if you want me to buy you a little bit of time.
Yeah, I'll think on my
I think
front
about
court.
this a lot. So I've done my ahead of their time all 2000s team, and there's a lot of good candidates from that range. Andrei Kirilenko is an obvious one with his positional versatility, his playmaking as a forward. Rasheed Wallace spacing the floor, good defensive big. Peja Stojakovic, big shooting wing. Gilbert Arenas with his volume of three-point attempts and free throw attempts. Kevin Martin. There's lots of good guys from the 2000s. But if we're going before then, I mostly focused on the 90s. At point guard, I have Tim Hardaway. I think, first of all, his ball handling was very much just unbelievable in his time. I mean, a lot of people consider him like the father of the crossover, certainly with that sort of speed and dynamism. Really good playmaker, but it is the pace with which he played, especially in those Run TMC Warriors years, and then the volume three-point shooting, I think, would translate very well to today's NBA. And I think that we see smaller guards thriving more today than ever before. So I think that he would benefit from that. At the two, I have Reggie. It's just a no-brainer. The volume shooting, the appreciation that just the NBA community has now for the off-ball value of a player like Reggie. I think he would rack up more accolades in this era for that reason alone. His efficiency also would be more appreciated. Just super ahead of his time offensively. You mentioned Larry, of course, the playmaking, the shooting at that size. Even though there are some aspects of his game that are throwback in their nature, there also are aspects that feel ahead of their time. And some things just translate, right? Physicality translates. Feel, basketball IQ translates. And Larry had all of that. I'll go with sort of a Larry light, Detlef Schrempf. I think that Detlef Schrempf, just when you're thinking again about 6'10 playmaking forward who could shoot, that is a more common archetype in today's NBA. It's something that I think we just have a better understanding of how to tap into with modern spacing and the overall skill development of some of those bigger guys. Power forward, one of my favorite players of the 1990s, I have Ant Mason. I think very much forecasted what we would come to expect from some undersized bigs of the last decade. And he wasn't like Draymond undersized. He's 6'8", but very stout, strong, 250, elite positional rebounder. So you weren't losing value on the glass, even if he was your 4 or 5 in some situations. Very good ball handler for that size, fluid ball handler, fluid mover overall, really good playmaker, very solid mid-range shooter. In the mid-40s from 10 to 16 feet in his career from when we have the tracking data, and on a small sample size, over 50% from 16 feet to the three-point line, and he could defend multiple positions. So I just think if you're looking at modern small ball lineups, he would be an ideal guy to have in those situations. And then at center, I went with Jack Sikma. I thought about going with a Sabonis or a Divac here, playmaking bigs, who were starting to stretch the floor, were taking a couple threes a game. But I ended up going with Sikma just because he was doing it before those guys. And there have been great passing bigs back to the 60s and the 70s. You have Russell and Wilt and Sam Lacey and Alvin Adams and Bill Walton, of course, all these guys. But you combine it with actually taking a couple threes a game and making them, Sikma was kind of the first guy to do that in the late 80s. I also thought about like some just conventional stretch bigs like Sam Perkins, but I think Sikma was ahead of his time in multiple ways in terms of how modern bigs are utilized as like playmaking hubs and then also with the shooting, whereas Sam Perkins is kind of just like, hey, this guy's big and he can shoot. Isn't that crazy?
I'm gonna take a couple of Sacramento Kings, I think, and I know they said pre-2000.
Pre-2000 money, you're not taking C-Web.
I can't take C-Web. I can't take.
He's not
Brad.
pre-2000. I mean, he starts pre-2000, but his most iconic years are early 2000s with the Kings.
I can't take Brad Miller, man. That's messed up.
You were gonna take Brad Miller?
Dude, Brad Miller had the schlick on him, man. That's what they don't get.
Mehmet Okur better. Mehmet Okur. There's a guy we should shout out as ahead of his
Yeah,
time.
actually. Andrei Kirilenko's not a bad pick either. He's probably the poster boy. I mean, he'd be a monster
He is the poster boy. Oh my god.
in today's league. Dude, that one stat that we did with Wemby still blows my mind. It's one of my favorite ever. The fact that there's only 3 guys to average 4.8 stocks per game, steals plus blocks per game since 2000, and it's Wemby, Ben Wallace, and Andrei Kirilenko of all people.
Dude,
Absurd.
it's not even surprising. I mean, he's one of the great defensive playmakers ever. Just an absolute menace, bro. I tweeted out a stat recently. The Jazz's record during his 3-year peak when he played versus when he didn't, they were an over 500 team when he played, and I want to say they were like 14-48 with something when he didn't. Like, his value, his on-off numbers from those years, he was just doing everything at such a high level. I love AK-47.
Such a monster, man.
But not pre-2000s.
Yeah, I was thinking about.
Is there
Chris
anyone else
Mullin,
you want to shout
too.
out?
I think Chris Mullin would.
Mully's a good
would have
one.
a great game in today's. I mean, you could just shoot from everywhere on the floor, well-rounded. It's interesting though, man, because
Could play make too.
I'm trying to think about other big men that we could go with, and that's the real crazy thing about big men are just so much more skilled now, man. Like, it's legitimately ridiculous. Like, I'm trying to think about any guy that's not just a straight-up rim protector or play finisher, and that archetype's just super rare. You know what I mean? If you want to shout out Bill Walton, if you want to shout out Alvin Adams, any of those guys who were, skilled passing big men too, could shoot a little bit. That archetype's super rare. That's why I mentioned C-Web, because, I mean, you think about just well-rounded guys. There's not a lot of archetypes like that, man.
No, I love C-Web. I'm a big C-Web guy. I think the fact that they kept him out of the Hall for as long as they did, with how lenient the NBA normally is, or the Basketball Hall of Fame, stupid, man. I love C-Web. I love passing bigs in general, and he is one of the best.